Welcome to Deep Dive Podcast, episode number 10. You know, many of us kick off our day with that comforting cup of coffee, right? Or maybe a soothing mug of tea. It's more than just a drink for a lot of people. It's a ritual, a boost, kind of a familiar companion. But what happens when that daily companion suddenly disappears? That's where it gets really interesting. Today, we're diving deep into something many of us have probably experienced or at least wondered about: caffeine withdrawal.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is really to give you a shortcut to being well-informed. We're exploring the fascinating science behind why our bodies react the way they do when we cut back on caffeine. We'll look at the symptoms, the timeline, and importantly, some practical strategies for managing withdrawal and finding sustainable energy.
Right. And we've pulled insights from some pretty comprehensive sources, like medical reviews from Verywell Health and perspectives from nutritionists over at Eat This Not That, just to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you. Okay, so let's unpack this. What exactly is caffeine? I mean, we all kind of know it, but what's the science?
Well, caffeine is basically a chemical substance. It's found naturally in various plants. Think coffee beans, cocoa, tea leaves, guarana, yerba mate. It's mainly known as a stimulant, for the central nervous system. And what's really fascinating here is how caffeine interacts with our brains. It actually works by blocking specific receptors. They're called adenosine receptors.
Adenosine receptor.
Right. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter that essentially tells your brain when it's tired and signals for sleep. So when caffeine blocks these receptors, you feel more alert. It stops that sleepy message getting through.
Ah, okay. So if it makes us alert like that, does that mean it's addictive? Is that the right word?
It's a really good question. People often call it an addiction, but caffeine isn't necessarily addictive in the same way as some other substances. It causes only a small increase in dopamine, which isn't really enough to trigger that strong, compulsive drug-seeking behavior of a true addiction. It's probably more accurately described as a stimulant, one that leads to tolerance and, physical or psychological dependence with regular use. And over time, your body responds to that constant blocking of adenosine by actually producing more adenosine receptors.
Oh, interesting. It's trying to compensate.
Exactly. And that is really key to understanding withdrawal.
Okay, so that makes sense then. When we suddenly take caffeine out of the equation, our body's balance is totally disrupted because of all those extra receptors, and that's when withdrawal symptoms kick in. And these can vary a lot, right, from person to person, maybe super mild for some, but quite extreme for others.
Precisely. Even stopping suddenly after drinking just small amounts of daily caffeine can cause symptoms. You don't have to be a heavy user. And let's start with the most common one, the one people really talk about: headaches. Studies show they happen in about 50% of people going through withdrawal.
Oh, yeah, the caffeine headache. It's a real thing. And they can be pretty bad, like a real pounder.
They really can. They typically show up about 12 to 24 hours after the last caffeine intake. They tend to peak, get most intense, run 20 to 51 hours after stopping. And they can unfortunately last anywhere from 2 days up to 9 days.
Wow, 9 days. So what's the science there? Why the head pounding specifically?
Well, during withdrawal, your body suddenly becomes much more sensitive to adenosine. Remember all those extra receptors it built? Now, the adenosine that's naturally there can bind to all of them, including receptors and networks that are known to trigger headaches and even migraines. Plus, there's another factor. Caffeine constricts blood vessels in the brain. So when you stop taking it, these vessels suddenly relax and dilate. That increases blood flow and pressure, which can definitely contribute to that headache pain.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So beyond the head pounding, what else can we expect? What other joys await?
Well, fatigue and drowsiness are major players. Makes sense, right? Caffeine was blocking adenosine, preventing tiredness. Without caffeine, adenosine can fully bind to all its receptors, signaling your body very clearly that it's time to feel sleepy. And this fatigue can be quite persistent, sometimes lasting up to 9 or even 10 days for some people. You'll just feel more tired, less alert than usual. You might also experience poor concentration or that feeling of mental fogginess, brain fog.
Yeah, I've heard people describe that.
Caffeine can boost focus, so without that usual perk, your brain may struggle to concentrate, especially when it's also dealing with headaches or fatigue.
It really sounds like it goes beyond just the physical stuff then. Can it actually affect our mood too?
Absolutely. A depressed mood is listed as a common symptom. Now, this isn't clinical depression, let's be clear. It's more a feeling of being down, maybe a loss of interest or pleasure in things you usually enjoy, simply because your body isn't getting its usual stimulant boost. And interestingly, caffeine itself can actually protect against depression up to a certain dose. But for those who already have depression, heavy caffeine use or suddenly withdrawing can sometimes make symptoms worse.
That's important to know. What about things like anxiety?
Yes, anxiety and irritability are also frequently reported. Anxiety might pop up from physiological changes or even just psychologically, like stressing about missing your morning coffee ritual. Studies do show that people who consume large amounts of caffeine regularly report higher anxiety and stress during withdrawal and irritability. Well, that often stems from the lack of caffeine's little dopamine nudge. Makes you feel moodier, maybe less patient.
Okay.
But like the other symptoms, these mood changes usually pass as your body readjusts over time. And then there are other physical symptoms. People report things like nausea, sometimes even vomiting, muscle aches and stiffness, maybe feeling lightheaded, just a general decrease in contentedness and energy levels.
Right.
Yeah.
Sound like if you get the nausea or vomiting, staying hydrated would be extra important.
Definitely crucial. Keep those fluids up.
So this brings up a question for our tea drinkers out there. Does giving up tea have the same kind of impact as quitting coffee? I mean, tea has caffeine, but usually less, right?
That's right. Tea generally contains less caffeine than coffee, but it definitely still has enough to produce withdrawal symptoms if you cut it out too quickly. You can expect pretty similar effects: the headaches, the fatigue, maybe dizziness, lightheadedness. The severity often depends on how much tea you are drinking and what type. Black tea generally has the most caffeine, then oolong, then green, and white tea has the least.
Okay, so similar symptoms, maybe just milder depending on the tea habit.
Potentially, yes. But there's another layer with tea. If we connect this to the bigger picture, giving up tea can also mean losing some of its unique health benefits, things beyond just the caffeine.
Oh, like what?
Well, for instance, tea, especially green tea, is really rich in antioxidants.
Right, you hear about that a lot.
So cutting it out means you're reducing your dietary antioxidant intake. It's probably a good idea to compensate by making sure you're getting plenty of antioxidant-rich fruits and veggies, blueberries, strawberries, artichokes, kale, that sort of thing. Also, those antioxidants in tea are thought to help reduce the risk of some chronic diseases like heart disease, stroke, maybe even some cancers. So removing tea might mean losing a bit of that protective effect unless your diet is already really well balanced.
Okay. What else?
Dehydration risk is a simple one. Tea counts towards your daily fluids. If you stop drinking it, you need to actively remember to drink more water.
Makes sense.
And here's an interesting one. Potential weight loss. If you typically drank your tea with lots of milk and sugar.
Ah, the hidden calories.
Exactly. If you cut that out and don't replace it with another sugary drink, you might see the scale move down a bit. But the flip side is, if you're used to sweetened tea, you might experience sugar cravings when you stop.
Right, trading one craving for another, potentially.
Yeah, so it's important not to just swap it for soda or something. Fruit-infused water, or maybe hot lemon water, can be good alternatives there. And one last point on tea stress. Certain teas have compounds that offer stress-reducing benefits.
Like chamomile.
Chamomile, yes, that's a classic caffeine-free one. Lavender, too. But even green tea contains L-theanine, an amino acid that has a calming effect and can even improve brain function, especially combined with its natural caffeine. So losing these specific teas might potentially lead to increased feelings of stress for some people.
Wow. Okay. So quitting tea isn't just about caffeine then. Lots to consider. This all sounds like, well, a lot to handle, potentially. But surely there are strategies to manage these symptoms and maybe make quitting caffeine a bit less painful.
Yes, absolutely. There are definitely ways to manage it. And an important point, if you're not aiming for zero caffeine immediately, even a small amount of caffeine can rapidly help counteract withdrawal effects, like a temporary fix.
Like easing the blow a bit.
Exactly. Now, for managing symptoms while you're cutting back or quitting altogether, for those headaches, standard over-the-counter pain medications like ibuprofen or acetaminophen can help. Some people find home remedies offer relief too, things like an ice pack on the head, applying peppermint oil to the temples, or even acupressure. There's a spot between your thumb and index finger you can massage.
Interesting. Worth a try. What about nausea?
Again, over-the-counter medications designed for nausea or vomiting can be helpful. And like we said, staying well hydrated is key for any gastrointestinal issues. And just for general well-being while you ride it out, crucially, drink enough water and really prioritize good rest and sleep. Don't underestimate how much that helps your body cope.
Okay, that's managing the symptoms. But what's the best way to actually quit caffeine for good? To minimize these effects from the start?
Right? The single most important tip for quitting caffeine successfully and with fewer side effects is to reduce your intake gradually.
Not cold turkey?
Definitely not cold turkey, unless you absolutely have to for medical reasons. Quitting abruptly is what triggers the most severe withdrawal symptoms. Your body has become dependent, remember? You need to gently wean it off. Now, the time frame varies, but generally it can take about 10 days for your body to be free of the most acute withdrawal effects. Though some milder symptoms might linger for up to 2 weeks for some individuals.
10 days to 2 weeks. Okay, so that gradual approach, what does that look like in practice? Any specific tips?
Yeah, a few practical things can help. First, maybe take an inventory. Figure out roughly how much caffeine you're actually consuming daily from all sources: coffee, tea, soda, energy drinks, even chocolate.
Good point. It adds up.
It really does. Then, create a plan to slowly reduce that amount down to zero over several weeks. Don't rush it. Switching to decaf is a really useful strategy. Decaffeinated coffee or tea still contains a small amount of caffeine, but significantly less, so it acts as a good stepping stone.
Kind of like tapering down.
Exactly. And as we keep saying, stay hydrated. Drinking plenty of water can help prevent headaches, especially those caused partly by dehydration, which can creep up when you cut out your usual fluid source. And finally, prioritize sleep. Seriously. Being well rested helps your body cope so much better when you're cutting out a stimulant like caffeine, and it helps combat that withdrawal fatigue naturally.
This whole conversation raises a really important question, though. If we're cutting back or quitting caffeine, how do we get that energy boost we might still be looking for? Where does that energy come from without the caffeine crutch?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the good news is there are many natural and, importantly, sustainable ways to boost your energy levels. First, you could explore caffeine-free beverage alternatives. There are lots now. Things like chicory root coffee, which has a similar taste, maca root powder, dandelion root tea, just plain lemon water, herbal teas like peppermint or ginger, rooibos tea.
What about smoothies?
Smoothies are great. Golden milk made with turmeric. Carob powder as a cacao replacement. Some people even use things like cordyceps, which is a type of fungi regarded as an energy booster. Lots to explore.
Okay, so alternatives to drink. What else?
Increase your physical activity. I know it sounds counterintuitive when you're feeling tired.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do sometimes.
Right. But being more active actually increases your energy levels in the long run. It improves circulation, boosts endorphins. The recommendation is usually around 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week. That could just be 30 minutes, 5 days a week. A brisk walk counts.
Okay, so moving more equals more energy eventually. Got it. Food must play a role, too.
A huge role. Adopting healthy eating habits is absolutely fundamental for sustained energy. What you eat, and even how you eat, significantly impacts your energy. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. They give you essential vitamins and minerals, plus they make great healthy snacks instead of sugary ones. Try to avoid really large, heavy meals, especially those high in salt, added sugar, and saturated fat. Those can often make you feel groggy afterwards. Focus on smaller, more frequent, nutrient-rich meals.
Right, avoiding that post-lunch slump.
Exactly. And incorporate whole grain, fibrous foods. They help keep you feeling full longer and prevent those sharp energy spikes and crashes you get from refined carbs and sugar. And again, always stay well hydrated. Dehydration is such a common, sneaky cause of low energy.
Okay, eat well, stay hydrated. What about sleep? We mentioned it for withdrawal, but for general energy?
It's paramount. Most adults really need about 7 hours of quality sleep per night. It's not just duration, but quality. If you snore heavily or often wake up feeling tired even after a full night, it might be worth talking to a healthcare provider about potential issues like sleep apnea. Waking up genuinely well-rested reduces that perceived need for caffeine in the first place.
Makes sense. Anything else for energy?
Maintaining a healthy weight is another factor. Carrying extra weight means your body has to work harder just for basic functions, and that can definitely deplete your energy levels. Healthy eating and exercise contribute here too, of course. And finally, maybe one of the biggest ones, reduce stress. Stress is a massive energy drain.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah. Managing stress through techniques like taking short physical activity breaks during the day, meditation or mindfulness, actually taking your vacation time, and making time for hobbies and activities you enjoy, all of this can help restore your natural energy levels.
That's a great list. It really highlights that energy isn't just about stimulants, it's about overall health. Now, it's clear from our chat that while many people use caffeine, maybe it isn't the best choice for everyone. For some people, perhaps it's not even an option they should consider.
That's absolutely right. there are certain groups who should definitely avoid caffeine, or at least be very, very cautious with it. This includes young children. Their systems just aren't equipped for it. Also, pregnant people are generally advised to limit or avoid caffeine. It can cross the placenta, and while the full effect on the fetus isn't completely understood, there is concern it could potentially slow blood flow to the placenta.
Okay. Any other groups?
Yes, children and adolescents who have pre-existing conditions, things like heart problems, seizure disorders, or even migraines, they might be more sensitive to caffeine's effects. People with diagnosed anxiety disorders often find that caffeine can worsen their symptoms, making them feel more jittery or on edge.
That makes sense, given it's a stimulant.
Exactly. And those who are prone to diarrhea should be cautious, especially if the caffeine source is also sweetened with certain sugars, as caffeine itself can have a mild laxative effect for some. And it's also worth noting that even for healthy adults, regular long-term consumption of large doses of caffeine, we're talking more than, say, 4 cups of coffee a day consistently, can lead to problems.
Like what kind of problems?
Things like chronic sleep issues, increased anxiety, potentially contributing to ulcers, general irritability, persistent headaches, dizziness, and even tinnitus, that ringing in the ears.
Wow.
But the good news is, in most cases, these effects tend to resolve when caffeine intake is significantly reduced or stopped altogether.
Right, so the body can recover. Finally, let's quickly touch on the persistence of caffeine. If you have that morning cup or maybe an afternoon pick-me-up, how long does it actually stick around in your system?
That's a good question, because it relates to things like sleep disruption. Basically, the more caffeine you consume, the longer it takes for your body to eliminate it. Caffeine has what's called a half-life. On average, it's about 4 to 6 hours for most adults.
Half-life, meaning?
Meaning that's the amount of time it takes for your body to get rid of half the caffeine you consumed. But, and this is important, this can vary widely from person to person. It could be as short as 1.5 hours or as long as 9.5 hours.
Wow, that's a huge range. What causes that variation?
Individual factors like your metabolism speed, your genetics, liver function, whether you smoke, certain medications you might be taking, pregnancy, all of these can affect how quickly you process caffeine.
Yeah.
So let's take an example. If you had a cup of coffee with 100 milligrams of caffeine, after about 5 hours, using that average half-life, you'd still have roughly 50 milligrams left in your system.
Okay.
After another 5 hours, so 10 hours total, it would be down to about 25 milligrams, and so on.
Ah, I see. That really explains why having coffee, even in the late afternoon or evening, can still keep you up way later at night. It lingers.
Exactly. It takes time to clear out completely.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you listening right now? We've explored some really fascinating science behind caffeine withdrawal today, from those common headaches and fatigue, which we now know are directly linked to changes in your brain's adenosine receptors and blood flow, to the more surprising impacts on mood and concentration. And we've learned that while the symptoms can definitely be intense, they are manageable, and taking that gradual reduction approach seems to be the kindest way to treat your body if you're looking to cut back or quit.
Yeah, I think this deep dive has really highlighted that while caffeine offers that quick, temporary boost, true, sustained energy really comes from a more holistic approach. It's about nourishing your body with healthy food, staying active, prioritizing quality sleep, managing stress effectively, and maintaining a healthy weight. Those are really the foundations of genuine, lasting well-being.
Well said. We really hope this deep dive has given you a clear shortcut to being well-informed about caffeine, its effects, and withdrawal, maybe with a few aha moments along the way.
And maybe as a final thought for you to mull over, considering how deeply ingrained caffeine is in our daily lives, our routines, our culture, how might a more mindful approach to our energy sources, all of them, not just caffeine, how might that fundamentally redefine our relationship, not just with alertness, but with our overall well-being?
Something to think about. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive.